In April of 2026, John Deere agreed to pay $99 million to settle a right-to-repair class action in the Northern District of Illinois. The money goes to farmers who paid authorized Deere dealers for repairs going back to January of 2018, divided up by labor hours on the invoice. This is the same company that, in January of 2025, was sued by the Federal Trade Commission for monopolizing the repair market for its own farm equipment. And if you have spent any time around a green tractor with a locked diagnostic port, the number does not surprise you. What should interest you is the precedent. Because John Deere did not invent this trap. Caterpillar paved this exact road decades ago. The dealer-only repair, the parts lockout, the software gatekeeping, and the yellow machines are the corpse that shows you where the green ones are heading. The bill John Deere just paid is the bill Caterpillar ran up first. This is a story about a business model, not a brand you love or hate. If this is your first time here, subscribe. We document the corporate decisions inside the boardrooms that hollowed out one of the most respected industrial brands of the 20th century, and which company is repeating the mistake now. The data tells the story. The invoices tell the story. The settlement filings tell the story. We just read them in order. So start where the trust came from. There was a long stretch where owning a John Deere tractor meant exactly that. You owned it. A farmer in Nebraska or a contractor in Bavaria bought a green machine and treated it like a generational tool, the kind of equipment a father handed to a son with the expectation that it would still be turning soil in 40 years. You could pull a wrench on it in the yard. You could trace a fuel line, swap an injector, rebuild a hydraulic pump on a Sunday with the manual open on the workbench. The dealer was a partner, not a gatekeeper. If a part failed in the middle of harvest, you fixed it, because the window to bring the crop in does not wait for an appointment. That self-reliance was the whole point of the green machine. It was a tool you commanded, not a subscription you serviced. And the math of that old arrangement was honest. The company sold you iron at a fair margin. You paid once. And the relationship after the sale was a relationship of supply, not control. You bought filters and belts and seals from the dealer because the dealer was convenient and stocked them, not because the dealer held a key that made the machine refuse to start. The difference between those two arrangements is the entire subject of this video. One is selling you a tool. The other is renting you permission to use a tool you already paid for in full. Somewhere along the way, the second arrangement quietly swallowed the first, and the people who engineered that swap were not engineers at all. They were finance people, and they had a model. Now, look at the model that quietly replaced that arrangement, and look at where it came from first. Caterpillar built the template. Over decades, the company turned its dealer network into something closer to a toll booth than a sales channel. The machine left the factory, but the right to keep it running stayed with the dealer. Original equipment parts were funneled through that network at the margins the company wanted. Diagnostic software, the codes that tell you what is actually wrong with the engine, sat behind dealer-only access. If your excavator threw a fault, you did not read it yourself. You called the dealer, you paid for the truck roll, you paid for the labor, and you paid for the privilege of learning what your own machine was telling you. Caterpillar trained an entire industry to accept a strange idea, that you do not truly own the machine you bought, you rent the right to keep it running through an authorized channel. Look at the actual mechanism, because the elegance of it is the point. A dealer makes a thin margin selling a new machine, sometimes razor thin because the iron is a commodity and customers shop the price. But the parts that machine will need over 20 years of work carry a margin that can run several times higher, and the labor to install those parts is billed at a rate the dealer controls and the company protects. So the company learns to treat the sale of the machine as the entry ticket to a far more profitable concession, the lifetime of repairs. The software is the lock on that concession. As long as the diagnostic tool and the calibration files and the authorization codes live only on the dealer's laptop, the dealer owns every repair the machine will ever need, and the company owns the dealer. The customer paid for the machine, but the company kept the part of the machine that decides whether it is allowed to run. That is not a parts business. That is a gate. And the company sits at it, collecting a toll for the working life of the equipment. That was not an accident of engineering. It was a capital allocation decision made for shareholders. Parts and service carry far fatter margins than selling iron, and they are steadier. They do not collapse when construction demand softens. So the company leaned into the recurring revenue and the captive aftermarket. This is the logic they teach in the case studies, the kind of thinking that comes out of Harvard Business School and lands in a quarterly earnings deck. Find the recurring revenue. Protect the high-margin annuity. Convert a one-time sale into a stream you can forecast, and a stream Wall Street will reward with a higher multiple. The MBA culture that took over American industry in the late 20th century did not see a tractor or an excavator. It saw a customer it had already captured, and a future of payments it could engineer into being. Shareholder primacy is a quiet phrase for a loud decision, and the decision was that the buyer's ownership was an asset the company could keep selling back to him, one repair at a time. You can watch the priorities move in the address itself. Headquarters left Peoria, Illinois, the factory town the company was practically synonymous with, and moved to Chicago in 2017, then to Irving, Texas in 2018. Closer to financial centers, closer to the logic of shareholder-first capital allocation, further from the shop floor. The machine stayed yellow. The thinking behind it turned into a spreadsheet, and in Europe especially, where independent workshops and a deep culture of self-repair run generations deep, the captive aftermarket squeeze hollowed out a lot of the goodwill the brand had spent the 20th century building. In much of Europe, the independent workshop is not a fallback, it is the backbone. A village mechanic keeps half the district's equipment alive, and the expectation is that you can buy the part, read the fault, and do the work, whether that work happens in an authorized bay or a barn. A model built on locking that mechanic out of the diagnostics does not just cost a farmer money there. It reads as an insult to a whole working tradition, and the brands that pushed it hardest spent decades of trust to save a few points of margin. That is the corpse. Now watch the Green Company walk down the identical road, step for step. John Deere electronified the tractor, which is reasonable. Modern agriculture runs on precision and sensors and software. But it also meant that fixing the machine increasingly required a laptop running proprietary software the dealer controlled. A farmer could replace a part with his own two hands and find the tractor would not run until an authorized technician plugged in and authorized the repair. The component was bolted in correctly. The machine still refused to work, because the software had not been told to accept it. So the farmer waited. During planting, during harvest, waited for a technician to drive out and charge for what amounted to a digital signature. Picture the scene in full, because this is where the abstraction becomes a man standing in a field. A sensor fails on a combine in the middle of the harvest window. The farmer knows exactly what it is. He has the correct replacement part in his hand, the genuine part, the right number, and he installs it correctly, torqued to spec, seated clean. He turns the key. The machine sees a new component and refuses to recognize it. The tractor will not move, not because anything is broken, but because the software is waiting for an authorization that only a dealer technician can enter. So the farmer makes the call. The dealer is booked. The nearest technician is 2 counties over, and the soonest appointment is days out. Meanwhile, the forecast turns. Rain is coming, and a crop left standing into the rain is a crop that loses grade and value by the hour. The man owns the machine. He owns the part. He has the skill, he did the work, and he stands there watching the weather close in while a fully repaired machine sits dead in the field waiting for a stranger to type a code. That is not a maintenance schedule. That is a hostage negotiation, and the company designed it that way on purpose. That is the captive market disease in its purest form, locking the customer out of his own machine, forcing the repair through the dealer, gatekeeping the software and the diagnostics. It is the same template Caterpillar wrote, just rendered in green and running on a newer operating system. The farming world noticed early. Independent repair advocates noticed. Louis Rossmann, who has documented the right to repair fight for years, hammered on it, taking the same argument the independent shops were making in barns and yards and putting it in front of an audience that could see the pattern repeating across every industry that builds something with a chip in it. The fight stopped being only about tractors and became about the principle that if you bought the thing, you are allowed to fix the thing. Massachusetts passed a landmark right-to-repair law back in 2020, a measure aimed at forcing manufacturers to share the diagnostic access they had spent years walling off, and it became a reference point for everyone arguing that ownership has to mean more than possession. The pattern became so recognizable that operators turned the brand into a verb. When a manufacturer locks you out of equipment you paid for in full, people say the company pulled a John Deere, or that a product got a John Deere done to it. That is what it looks like when a captive market strategy becomes so notorious that your own name turns into the warning label. For a long stretch, the company could absorb the criticism because it was winning. The equipment is genuinely excellent. The market position is dominant. The profits are real. Criticism from farmers and repair shops did not move the needle. The complaints lived in comment sections and farm forums and the occasional local news segment, and a company earning record service margins can let a comment section shout itself hoarse. Then, the regulators arrived. In January of 2025, the Federal Trade Commission sued John Deere, accusing it of monopolizing the market for repairing its own large agricultural equipment. The exact charge the independent shops had been making for years, now in a federal complaint instead of a comment section. The argument did not change when it moved buildings. The shops had been saying the company used software to corner the repair work on machines it no longer owned. The complaint said the same thing in the language of antitrust, and suddenly the comment section had subpoena power. And then came April of 2026, and the $99 million. Look closely at the structure of that settlement, because the structure is the confession. The fund compensates farmers who paid authorized dealers for repairs going back to January of 2018, and the payouts are distributed by labor hours, which means the settlement is literally calculated off the invoices the dealer lockout generated. Every hour a farmer was forced to pay an authorized technician to do what he could have done himself becomes a unit of compensation. Think about what that formula admits. The company is not paying a flat number to make a nuisance go away. It is paying in proportion to how much repair work the lockout funneled through its dealers, which means the more a farmer was forced to rely on an authorized technician, the larger his share of the fund. The remedy is shaped exactly like the harm. The money is one half of it. The other half matters more. Deere also agreed to provide farmers the digital diagnostic and repair tools for large agricultural equipment for the next 10 years. Read that again. The remedy is to hand back the very access the entire model was built on withholding. A company does not promise to give you the keys for the next decade unless the previous arrangement was keeping the keys from you on purpose. The court granted preliminary approval on May 18th of 2026, with a final fairness hearing set for October 29th of 2026. After the settlement landed, the Federal Trade Commission paused its antitrust case. That sequence is worth sitting with. The agency built a monopolization case. The private plaintiffs reached a deal that handed back the tools and compensated the years of forced repairs, and the regulator stepped back rather than press on. The cascade ran its full length, from the locked diagnostic port, to the verb, to the state law in Massachusetts, to the federal suit, to a 9-figure check, and a 10-year promise to unlock the tools. Caterpillar pioneered the model, and never had to write a settlement of this shape. John Deere inherited the model in a louder decade, with cameras on every farm and a repair movement that had already named the disease, and the bill came due in writing. The yellow company built the trap in a quieter time and walked away. The green company built the same trap when the whole world had a phone and a comment section, and the timing is most of why one paid and one did not. So where does that leave things in 2026? Be precise about it, because vague corporate bashing is worthless here. John Deere remains a dominant, profitable, technically superb manufacturer. $99 million is real money, but it is not an existential wound to a company this size. The diagnostic tools coming to farmers for 10 years are a genuine win for the people who fought for them. But notice what the settlement does not touch. It does not change the underlying incentive that built the lockout in the first place, the same incentive that pulled Caterpillar from Peoria to Irving, the pull toward recurring high-margin service revenue, and away from the idea that a machine, once sold, belongs to the buyer. The structure that rewards locking customers out is still there. The financialization that treats a sold machine as a future stream of payments is still rewarded by Wall Street, still taught as best practice, still sitting in the incentive packages of the executives who run these companies. The settlement just put a price on it for the years between 2018 and now, and a 10-year clock on one specific category of tools. That is the warning. The yellow corpse shows you the destination. The green company just paid the first installment on arriving there. If you farm or run heavy equipment, drop the brand and the model in the comments, and tell me the last time a dealer locked you out of your own machine. Let us see how many of us watch the right to repair fight happen in real time, on real farms and real job sites, before any boardroom admitted it. Because that is the part the filings will never capture. The farmers and the mechanics saw this trap long before any court or boardroom would say it out loud. They felt it the first time a correctly installed part sat dead, until a technician arrived with a laptop. They felt it standing in a field during harvest, watching the weather close in, waiting on an appointment to authorize a repair they could have finished in 20 minutes. They did not need a Federal Trade Commission complaint or a $99 million fund to tell them what was happening. They had the yellow machines as a warning already, the Caterpillar precedent sitting right there, showing exactly how a respected industrial brand turns its customers into renters. So, here is the question worth arguing about. Does the $99 million settlement actually change the road John Deere is on, or does it just put a tidy price tag on the lockout, a cost of doing business the company can pay, and keep driving in the same direction? Caterpillar already drove to the end. Maybe the 10-year tool promise is the real turn. Maybe it is a pause before the same incentives reassert themselves the moment the cameras look away. The operators who saw it coming already know. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.